What Ike Allen and Ande Anderson have created at AVAIYA is what the world needs.
Hello, AVAIYA family. I'm Ande Anderson. My partner, Ike Allen, and I are teachers, mentors, and the co-owners of AVAIYA University. AVAIYA is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you, as always, for joining us. Our fellow teacher, Kevin Petersen, is back with us today to talk about how to manage codependency. Kevin founded the Chronic Hope Institute in 2014, where he specializes in working with individuals and families that are struggling with codependency, parenting, and addiction. He has also authored 2 Amazon bestsellers. He offers training for mental health professionals and is available for speaking and guest appearances. And he lives in Jacksonville, Florida with his wife, Amy, and his dogs. So welcome back to AVAIYA, Kevin.
Wow, that was a mouthful. You did it so well.
Well, there's so much more to say about all of your expertise, Kevin, but good to see you again. Okay, right. A lot of times in the conversation with codependency, we do hear about addiction, right? A lot of households have both addiction struggles as well as codependency. Why is it that these tend to go hand in hand?
Well, I always say it's kind of like peanut butter and jelly. They just kind of naturally gravitate towards one another. Initially, what I would say is that someone who struggles with codependency, the first thing I always like to sort of say is, look, let's take a look at you and let's take a look at your background and your childhood and the family of origin and where you came from. And pretty quickly, we started identifying that as a child, they had a lot of responsibility lumped onto them. And almost always, that's where we start to see where the addiction starts to play the role, is that as a child, they were forced into a position to be parentified because one or both parents were struggling with either mental health or addiction or alcoholism. And they had to fill the void. They had to take care of things. And the funny part is, as kids, we get rewarded for that behavior. Like, oh, you're such a good helper. You're so great at solving problems. You're so great at taking care of me. It's, oh, thank you so much. And we get lots of love and affection for it. The problem is, as an adult, it doesn't really serve us well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. Definitely doesn't create the same opportunities for us as an adult as it did when we were kids, right? When we're just surviving and getting through, what we had to get through as children. So what are some symptoms that you see common in codependency?
Well, one of the first ones, and it's the big dirty word, right? It's enabling, and so what does that mean? Where do we draw the line? How do we know what's right and what's wrong? And what I always tell people is, ask yourself this question: is this something they're capable of doing themselves? And the first thing they will always say is, well, yeah, but I'm like, I didn't ask you if they will do it. I asked you if they're capable of doing it themselves. And if the answer is yes, then you need to stay out of it. One of our big things is telling people there's 2 kinds of business. There's my business and not my business. And you got to remember which one is which. And then my other favorite little cutie pie phrase that I learned long time ago is, help is the sunny side of control. So, there's always this vision of, well, I'm just trying to help. Well, yeah, you're trying to help make sure everything gets done the way you want it to get done, because that makes you feel comfortable and makes you feel safe, as opposed to allowing the person to learn how to problem solve and take care of their own issues.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Yeah, I love that part, because that is so true, right? Like how uncomfortable we can feel when we can't control or we can't, make sure something happens the way we want it to. I guess, what would you say are some ways that we can deal with our own discomfort in those situations?
Well, and again, understanding that I spend the majority of my time working with families that are struggling with addiction and codependency, right? And I would say that most people that come from codependency or have codependency, if we shake the tree hard enough, there's alcoholics and addicts are going to start falling out, or severe mental health, or both. So what I always tell people is, the best thing you can do to help your person is to help yourself. And so you got to get into your own recovery. One of the most important things I always tell people is, you got to remember that setting boundaries isn't about the other person. Setting boundaries is about you making a commitment to change your behavior. Because if you change your behavior, you inherently change the entire system's behavior. And the parallels I try to draw are like, think about the best boss you ever had. And did they micromanage you? Did they hover over you? Did they shame you? Did they punish you? No, they stood back and said, hey, look, I'm here to help. Let me know what you need. And they may have watched you fail a couple of times. And that's kind of how you want to start looking at this, whether it's your spouse or a family member or a child. You want to stand back and be like, well, okay, but I'm going to have to let you handle this and learn how to solve your own problems. And that's going to be hard for me because I already know the answers. And I want to jump in and I want to guide you down the right way. But then the irony is those are the same people that are like, I don't understand why he can't take care of himself. And it's like, well, why should he? He knows you'll do it. There's no incentive for him to change. You have to create that incentive for the change by changing you, not changing them. That was much of a lecture.
Yes, therein lies our business, right? That's
right. That's my business.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you sharing a little bit about that, because I know it can be really, if we're used to that pattern of, oh, I want things done or this to happen in a certain way, and we have that kind of controlling mechanism in us. It can be really uncomfortable to let that go and just see what happens. So yes, good ways to kind of deal with that.
Right. And what I always tell people is that your answer is the exact same answer for the other person. If we want the other person to go to therapy and maybe a 12-step program or some sort of, behavior modification program, you have to do the same thing.
Right.
It's not just this idea, this old idea of taking someone who has a problem, removing them from the family system for 30, 60, or 90 days, and then bringing them back to the same family system that hasn't changed, and then wondering why they failed. It's like, well, they never stood a chance. Everyone's got to get on board with changing the way they operate and changing the way they interact with one another. And once we can do that, that's when we can really implement wholesale change.
And so in that instance, Kevin, if someone in the family, whatever that looks like, is just not willing to do that, how does the rest of the family, I guess, deal with that?
Sure. And now we're into my favorite thing, boundaries, is just being able to tell someone, I love you and I'm going to respect your choice not to participate in a program of recovery, whether it's for yourself or alcohol or drugs or whatever it is, mental health, whatever it is. But I'm also going to put up some boundaries between you and me, because I'm not going to continue to have you take me down the road. I'm not going to continue to have my life defined by your chaos, drama, and crisis. And I want to be super clear that I will help you. I'm not shutting the door on you. This isn't the old tough love world. This is, look, I get it. I'm respecting your choice. If that's how you want to live, that's fine. I'm just not going to go with you. But if you ever want help and you want help changing, I'll point you in the right direction, and but I won't do it for you. I mean, I can't, but I will always be able to be there for you to help you walk through the door of getting help. But then you actually got to do the work yourself. So that's really what I would say to someone in the family system, whether it's someone who's struggling. I mean, let me tell you something. I have families where someone will get sober or dig into their mental health issues and come back to the family system, and the family system's like, we're not changing. Good for you, but we don't have a problem. And then it's the person that's got the identified issue that comes to me and says, I think I need some help. They're not willing to support me in this process. And it's like, okay, that's cool. You can still say, I love you, but I'm just not going to do this. I'm not going to participate with this. But if you're interested in joining me in this process, let me know and I'll be happy to share it with you.
Yeah, I would imagine that definitely happens. That's so interesting. Any other suggestions you have for people on strategies they can implement to manage codependency? Anything else you want to say about that?
Well, the thing I always say is that when we take a look at you don't have to go to a 12-step program, that's not necessary if you don't want to. The two things we're looking to identify is, one, we have to get abstinent around the behavior, whether it's drugs, alcohol, porn, gambling, controlling people, managing things, being in charge of everything, that's an addiction as well, by the way. And then, so we have to get abstinent from that behavior. And then we have to also change the way we treat other people. Okay. So we have to start addressing our behavior and how we interact with others. How you achieve that, whether it's through church or therapy or yoga or CrossFit or whatever, I don't care. But those are the two things that have to happen. Those are the two measuring sticks, and if you can, however you get that accomplished, that's fantastic. And there's certainly alternative ways of going about it. I'll tell you what I get a lot of is these people that are like, well, yeah, my dad was an alcoholic and that was a long time ago and and I don't really have any problems with that. And then we start talking and they really start to sort of show themselves and they're like, oh yeah, but I keep repeating bad relationships, or I keep repeating bad relationships at work, or I keep taking jobs where I'm getting abused and emotionally drained. Or they keep referring to every past relationship as that person was crazy, they were borderline, they were narcissistic. And I always seem to attract those people. I'm like, okay, so let's talk about that. What do all those things have in common? And I'm not trying to shame you. I want to help you, but in order to help you, we got to call it what it is. It's not just you having a series of bad luck. You're drawn into that situation because you're looking for your next project.
Right.
And that's a hard pill to swallow.
It is. And I'm glad you mentioned it though, because yes, who wants to hear that, right? We never, probably most people don't want to hear, right, that, oh, I am the common denominator, but yeah, you got to get present to, okay, well, it is true that I am the common denominator in all these things happening, or these unhealthy relationships in my life for sure. And I'm curious too, like what happens when people they struggle with codependency and they don't manage it. They don't do the strategies that you're telling them to implement.